So as we know, these genes will work as a pairs always. Now, these genes basically, which will controls the same characteristics. As we told you, for example, length of a organism, which will be controlled by the gene, either the tallness, capital T, and the dwarfness, small t. So that is why a genes which will controlling the same characteristics of organism, we will be saying as there are two types. So that is what we are going to study now. One is called as dominant gene, and the second one is called as recessive gene, which will control the same characteristics of an organism. That is what you have to remember. So this is the most important words which we are going to study continuously in this chapter, used continuously. So now let us come to the dominant gene. So I don't want go very in detail in this dominant gene. So remember, dominant gene is the one which will decides the appearance of an organism even in the presence of an alternative gene. So for example, you both are two friends. Let me consider any two friends. Now, one person can take the decision, understanding, without asking or without depending on the second person. Of course, they are staying as a pair, but no value for the second person. So that is called as a dominant gene. A dominant gene is the one who will decide the organism, appearance of an organism. For example, I will make a pairs, each two members as one group. Now I'll ask you to perform some activity or something. Now, one person who will dominate another person without his suggestions, without his knowledge, everything will be decided by only one person. What they are going to be appearance, how they are going to be looks, what kind of dress they are wearing, everything will be decided by only one person. There is no value for the second person. He will be existed, but the thing is, does not give any importance for him. So like that gene, which we used to call as dominant gene. A dominant gene is the one which will decide the appearance of an organism even in the presence of an alternative gene is known as dominant gene. So doesn't mean that dominant gene existed alone. Always remember, no gene is existed alone. It is not possible. Always they will be present in how, guys? They will be present in pair only. Understanding? But there is no importance for the second gene. That gene is only called as dominant gene, which will always decides independently of the appearance of an organism is only called as dominant gene. For example, if we'll take the length of a plant, if we'll take either tallness or we will say what? Dwarfness. Is it yes or no? Please respond. So now if we'll take here, so maybe a capital T can present in the gene or capital T, small t can present. Now if we'll take here, this capital T, both are actually a dominant gene, so that the plant can appear to be how, guys? Tall or dwarf? Anybody? Tall. But if we take the second set of gene here, capital T is the dominant one. Capital T is the dominant one. So small t, even though the small t is present, dwarfness is present, the capital T is dominated the small t. The small t is dominated by capital T. Still the plant is appears to be how? Tall or dwarf? Anybody?
Tall.
Plant is appears to be tall. That is why we will say capital T is the dominant one. Even though a small t is existed in the pair, but it does not have any kind of importance. So that is what we used to call as dominant gene. So it always dominates the recessive gene. You can see capital T is dominating the small t. It is not giving any importance for the pair which is existed with that. So that is what you have to remember, which will decides the appearance of an organism in the presence of another identical gene. You can see does not depend on second pair. That is only called as dominant gene. Hope everybody clear. Now, if we take the second one, recessive gene. Please, all of you remember. So, what do you mean by recessive gene means? So, for example, I will take the dwarfness. Dwarfness, how we can represent, guys? Anybody? Dwarfness, how we can represent?
Small t.
Yes.
Small t.
If you have taken the dwarfness, all of you remember, dwarfness is represented with a small t. Now, if you want to see the plants must be short or dwarf plants. Dwarf plants, if this character need to appear in the organism, then this alone cannot take the decision. It cannot be make it decision individual. Always it needs a similar kind of gene help. Then only always like a pair, which will take discussions and decide, like two friends. So which cannot take the own decisions like a partners. So they have to share among each other and they will give both are having the importance. So under the presence of similar kind of second gene, only the appearance of an organism will decide. So like this gene is called as recessive gene. So a single gene cannot decide. Single gene cannot decide the appearance of an organism. That is what we used to call as recessive gene. Do you understand, everybody? Please respond.
Yes, sir.
That is why always remember dominant gene will use to represent with the capital letters. Okay, everybody? Yes, please. Capital letters and recessive gene we used to represent with the what? Small letters. So now I am saying the two statements. Remember, in any organism, like in future, I am saying whatever the characteristic is appearing in the body, if it is a dominant gene, so that one gene is like one capital letter gene is sufficient, or both capital letters is present, also it will be appears to be the same characteristics. So which will never depend on the second pair. That is what we used to say dominant gene. So for example, if you want to get the tall plants, so that we'll be having a two genes, either both capital T, or we will get capital T, small t. So these are the genes, pairs of genes, which basically present for getting the tall plants. So this is only we used to call as genotype, which we are discussing, we will study actually. So genotype is the description of genes present in an organism. So that is what, Mukesh. If you take both capital T and capital T, that is what I am saying. So one T is present, it is still the dominant one. Second one is either a capital T or small t, doesn't matter. Always the plant is appears to be tall. Understand, Mukesh?
Yes, sir.
It will never depend. It won't think either the second gene is present capital T or small t. So if the first one is a capital letter, it is always indicating dominant. So second one, either it is present another dominant gene or recessive gene, is not problem, because it will never depend. First one itself, it will decides the appearance of an organism. Understand?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So that is why what gene, as we know, every genes they are present in the form of pair. Now, the description of this pair is only called as genotype. All of you should remember. This genotype is always represented with the alphabets, either capital letters or with the small letters. That is what you have to remember. Any doubt, anybody, please ask. Clear, guys? Now,
Yes, sir.
this genotype is not visible to us. Visible in the sense of the inside gene, it is not see with our naked eye. Now, suppose, I don't know, I have been noticed that the plant is appears to be tall. Tallness is appears to be outside or not. It is a character which we can visible or not. Please respond. It is
Sure.
visible in an organism. Suppose I am very fatty, I am black in color, I am white in color, my hair is brown. Understand? My skin tone is like this, my eyes are blue color. That is the character which is visible in an organism. It is depends on whom, guys? It is depends on the genotype. So what is present in that? So now, which is appears to be us? The what is the genotype present decides the characteristics or appearance of an organism. So which is appearing to us, the visible in an organism is only called as, what is to call? Anybody? Is to called as phenotype. So that is why you can see either I am appears to be tall. The tallness is visible to you, then it is what the phenotype. If I am appears to be short or dwarf, then that is what is the phenotype which is appears. That is what these are the tall or dwarf are the traits which can be seen by us, are visible to us. That is why we will say a phenotype. So which is visible to us, the physical appearance. Physical appearance, how the organism is looks visible to us is only called as a phenotype. That is what you have to remember. And this physical characteristics, which is basically decided by, who will decide the physical characteristic? Will be decided by the, please respond. Will be decided by whom? The characteristic is decided by genotype, and what characteristic is appearing to us, visible to us, is only called as phenotype. For example, tall plant. Tall plant means either capital T or capital T, or we will say capital T and small t. Now you tell me, this is the characteristics which is appears to be in these cases. Both the cases is tall. Tallness we will say. So this tallness is called as, what we used to call, genotype or phenotype? Anybody?
Phenotype.
It is called as phenotype. So this phenotype is causing or appears because of something. What is that? Which is present in the organism. That is only called as what?
Dominant genes.
That is only called as what? Genotype. Understanding? So a phenotype which is visible to us is decided by the genotype. So genotype contains what? Dominant and recessive gene, which is decides the characteristics or trait of an organism. So that is what you have to remember. Is it okay, everybody? Please respond. So now let us write fastly all the definitions of dominant one, recessive one, genotype and phenotype, so that we will go to the next one. So write it first one, dominant gene. The gene which decides the appearance of an organism. The gene which will decide appearance of an organism. Appearance of an organism, even in the presence of an alternative gene. Even in the presence of an alternative gene. So now you tell me, is there any importance for the alternative gene in the dominant gene? Is there any importance? That is what I am asking. There is no importance for the alternative gene in the case of dominant gene. So dominant gene it itself will decide the characteristics of an organism or appearance of an organism. That is what called as dominant gene. So please write the definition. The gene which decides the appearance of an organism, the gene which decides the appearance of an organism, even in the presence of an alternative gene, is known as dominant gene, It will dominate whom, guys? Dominant gene will dominate whom? It will dominate the recessive gene for the same characteristics on the other chromosome of the pair. Next, recessive gene. Right. The gene which can decide the appearance of an organism, only in the presence of another identical gene, is called a recessive gene. Only under the presence of another identical gene is called recessive gene. A single recessive gene cannot decide the appearance of an organism. Sai, anything doubt, Sai? Of an organism. That is what. Next, dominant gene always represented with the capital letters, or the recessive gene is always represented with the small letters. That is what you have to remember it. Is it okay? Clear, everybody? Yes, please. Anything doubt?
Yes, sir.
That is what. So next, genotype. Genotype is the description of genes present in an organism. Genotype is always a pair of letters. Genotype is a pair of letters such as capital T, small t, or small t, small t. Example, pair of letters, always pair of letters. Okay. Next, phenotype. Phenotype means what? A visible characteristics to us. The characteristics are a trait. You can write the trait. The trait which is visible in an organism is called its phenotype. Till here, any doubt, please ask. Anyone? Alana, understand Alana? Rudreswar? Naren? Clear?
Yes, sir.
Sai, understand Sai? Mukesh?
Yes, sir.
So this is what is genotype, phenotype, and everything. Now let us see watch a small video regarding this genotype and how it will be transforming and all, so that you'll get some complete idea regarding this genotypes and all. So how these characteristics will transfer from the form of DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid.
Of an organism, plant or animal. The characteristics or traits of parents. How are characteristics or traits transmitted to progeny? Genes are responsible for the characteristic features or traits of an organism, plant or animal. The characteristics or traits of parents are transmitted to their progeny, offspring, through genes present on their chromosomes during the process of sexual reproduction. Genes work in pairs. There is a pair of genes for each characteristic of an organism. One is dominant gene and the other is recessive gene. Each parent possesses a pair of genes for each characteristic on a pair of chromosomes. However, each parent passes only one of the two genes of the pair for each characteristic to its progeny through gametes. Thus, the male gamete and the female gamete carry one gene for each characteristic from the gene pairs of parents, which are located on the pair of chromosomes. But when a male gamete fuses with a female gamete during fertilization, they make a new cell called zygote, which is a full set of genes or a full set of chromosomes. This zygote grows and develops to form a new organism having characteristics or traits from both the parents, which it has inherited through genes.
Do you understand, everyone? So if you have taken the male gametes and as well as female gametes, for every characteristics, father and as well as mother is donating how many genes? Pair of genes or single gene? Each one is donating a single gene, but when it will comes to the baby, so one gene from the father and one gene from the mother, either it may be a dominant gene or recessive gene, doesn't. For each character, a father will donate one gene and mother will donate another gene. So when it will comes to the fertilization, after fertilization, so both will be appears to be at what? Every character. For example, tallness or length of a body. Father will give you one gene and mother also will give you one gene. So in that, if it is both are recessive gene, then the plant is or the person is appears to be dwarf. If at least one is, suppose father is tall and like a gene is donated by father is capital T and mother is small t, then the baby is appears to be tall only. That one character I am saying, one characteristic or one trait from the parents. So when during the sexual reproduction, every organism, male gamete called as that sperm and as well as female gamete egg, they'll be having only a single gene for every characteristic. Then it will be fuses. So all the characteristics, they will become a pair so that it will be well set of genes are present in the chromosomes of a nucleus of the baby, or we will take the zygote, how it will be forming zygote to it will be developing into the baby, embryo and baby. So that is how the genes will help to transfer the characteristics from parents to the offspring. So that process is only called as heredity. Inherits the characters. Inherits the characters from parents to the offsprings is only called as heredity. So now this is what the words we will use basically in this heredity chapter. Now when two parents cross, so or they will be breed, both are same. Any two parents, if you have taken any organism, so when they will cross or they will breed and they will produce a, what they will produce, guys? Parents, they will cross means what they will produce? They will produce the offsprings. So these offsprings only, what is the word you have to use? I told you offsprings also we can call it as what? Yes, please. Progeny. Please remember, offsprings is called as progeny. Then when two parents, during the cross or breed, if they will produce the progeny or offsprings, then this is called as a first filial generation, or we will say F1 generation. Please remember. So they are called as F1 generation, a first filial, F-I-L-I-A-L, filial generation. Okay. That is what F indicate filial generation, which denotes the progeny of a cross. Now, when the first generation progeny, this F1 generation, this progeny, again they will undergo cross after maturation. Once they will be attains the certain maturation, and after that this F1 generation undergo the cross, or we will say breed, and they will again produce a new progeny. So that is called as F2 generation. So remember, parent, they undergo the cross and they will produce the offsprings or progeny. They are called as first filial generation, or we will say F1 generation. Now, this F1 generation undergo cross and they will go to they will get the new progeny. That is what we used to call as second filial generation, which we used to call as F2 generation. So that is why the generation which is produced by parents is called as F1 generation, and the generation which is produced by F1 generation is called as what, guys? Is called as what? Please respond. The generation which is produced by F1 progeny is only called as what? F2 generation. So a mother and father are called basically, who is giving the F1 generation is called as parental crossing. What do you used to call? It is, we used to say like they are called as parental generation. So which is because of the parental crossing, we are going to get the first family or the first offsprings. That is called as parental generation. And the children are F1 generation. Now, and the grandchildren, they will become F2 generation. For example, humans will take now your grandparents, if you have taken their grandparents, grandparents are the parental generation. So for them, when they will be in cross or breed, we used to get a baby. That is what we will say F1 progeny. Now this F1 progeny, once they will attain the maturity, they will undergo again the cross and they will produce the grandchildren. So that grandchildren is only called as, we used to say, what is that called as? F2 generation. So that is what it will take. So parental generation and F1 generation. So parental generation will give you the F1 progeny and F1 generation will give you the F2 progeny. That is what the process will take place. So Mendel was the first scientist who conducted this inheritance, systematic study of inheritance, which is involved in this transfer of characteristics from parents to F1 progeny and F1 progeny to F2 generation. So that is why he is known as a father of genetics, and he did this all this systematic study of pattern of inheritance with a variety of pea plants. That is what we are going to study in the next class. So the scientific names of the pea plant, basically these pea plants which is grew in his garden. So that is why he has been done a lot of experiments and as well as continuous observation study of these pea plants only. The scientific name of this pea plant is called as Pisum sativum. Pisum sativum. So this is the scientific name of a pea plant. So he observed some of the characteristics or traits of the pea plants whose transmission to progeny. That is why he has started investigating on these pea plants, that the height of the pea plant or length of the stem of a pea plant, like a tallness or dwarfness, and as well as shape of the seeds, and as well as tallness or dwarfness, whatever it is, he is noticed that transforming from one generation to next generation, he has been observed the changes in this tallness and as well as dwarfness of the plants, and as well as shape of the seeds is continuously like different generations, different seeds appears to be. So that is why he has investigated a lot of experiments on these pea plants, and he has been found the shape of the seeds like round or wrinkled, and even the color of the seeds like yellow and green, everything. And he has observed all this investigation based upon even the flowers also. The flowers of these pea plants, he has been noticed, even they are white or even violet color. Like this, so many characteristics he noticed. He investigated on pea plants which will grow on his garden, and he made lot of experiments, and he has been made conclusions also. That is what Mendel's laws we used to call, which is applicable to all the organisms which we are going to study in the next class. Now, next class we'll see why Mr. Mendel has been chosen only this pea plant, why can't some other organism, and what is the conclusions made by this one. That is what rules for inheritance of traits. That is all we'll discuss in the next class. So till here, let it be stop. And please kindly prepare for your tomorrow's exam. Whole day you have to prepare only for that. Okay. Thank you everybody. We'll meet in tomorrow's class.